When Daniel called me a financial burden at his company dinner, the entire table fell silent. His colleagues stared at their plates, embarrassed. My own daughter Sam looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. And my grandson Noah? He squeezed my hand under the table, the only one brave enough to offer comfort. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. Because while my son-in-law complained about supporting me, he had no idea that the mysterious EM Ventures he desperately tried to impress was actually his mother-in-law sitting right across the table. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never planned to live with my daughter's family at 58, but life rarely follows our careful blueprints, does it? 20 years as a senior investment advisor at Meridian Financial had given me everything I thought I wanted: financial security, professional respect, and a portfolio that would make anyone in Portland's financial district envious. I'd built my reputation carefully, specializing in early-stage tech investments that my male colleagues often overlooked. By 50, I had enough to retire comfortably, perhaps travel the world as Bob and I had always dreamed. Then Sam called, her voice shaking. "Mom, I need you." My daughter, always fiercely independent, was drowning. Her marketing career was taking off just as Noah was diagnosed with processing difficulties that required specialized attention. Dan was launching his tech startup and working 18-hour days. They needed help, and I couldn't say no. So Bob and I sold our downtown condo and bought the large craftsman house in the suburbs with a separate in-law suite for us. Just for a year or two, Sam had promised. That was 8 years ago. At first, the arrangement worked beautifully. I'd wake early to get Noah ready for school, working with him on the specialized exercises his therapists recommended. Bob would drive him to his private school while I prepared the house for the day. Sam could focus on her career, and Dan had the freedom to build Wiltech Solutions from the ground up. I managed the household finances, scheduled everyone's appointments, and made sure Noah never missed a therapy session. I didn't mind stepping back into a supportive role. Noah was thriving under the consistent attention, his test scores improving steadily, and I had quietly maintained my investment activities, waking before dawn to review market reports and manage my portfolio. No one in the house knew about my continued involvement in finance. They simply saw Grandma Ellie, always available, always dependable. Bob began spending more time at the golf course, claiming he needed the exercise. I didn't blame him. The dynamic in the house had shifted, with Dan increasingly positioning himself as the head of the household despite the fact that Bob and I owned the property outright. "My house, my rules," Dan would say when making decisions, while Sam looked on uncomfortably. "Just let it go," she'd whisper when we were alone. "His ego needs this. You know how hard he's working to make Wiltech successful." What neither of them knew was that I'd been watching Wiltech closely from the beginning. When Dan had struggled to find seed funding, I had anonymously invested through my old colleague Jason Reed, creating EM Ventures specifically for this purpose. Not because I believed in Dan particularly, but because I believed in the technology, and I wanted to help secure my daughter's future. Jason became Wiltech's official COO, but no one except him knew that the company's mysterious primary investor was actually the quiet grandmother who packed Noah's lunch every morning. The first 4 years passed quickly. Noah improved tremendously, with the consistent support. Wiltech began to grow, moving from Dan's home office to a small space downtown, then to a larger office as they secured additional funding rounds. My investment had multiplied several times over, though I continued to maintain my anonymity through complex corporate structures. I had no desire to interfere with Dan's leadership. I simply wanted the company to succeed for my family's sake. But something was changing. As Wiltech grew, so did Dan's ego. I noticed it in small ways at first, interrupting me at family dinners, dismissing my opinions on business matters despite my extensive background, making decisions about the house, without consulting Bob or me. Then came the comments. Little digs about retirees who don't understand today's economy, or how supporting 3 generations is a real financial challenge. Sam rarely countered these remarks. She'd grown increasingly distant, working later, hours, often texting instead of calling when she wouldn't make it home for dinner. Noah and I maintained our close bond, spending evenings working on his projects while the house grew quiet around us. "Why does Dad talk to you like that?" Noah asked one evening while we were baking cookies. At 8 years old, he noticed far more than his parents realized. "Like what, sweetheart?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "Like you're not important. You're the most important person in this house. You take care of everything." I hugged him tightly, flour dusting both our shirts. Sometimes, adults forget to appreciate the quiet things people do. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Not really. I'd spent my career commanding respect in boardrooms, making million-dollar decisions that changed companies' trajectories. Now I was invisible in my own home, my financial acumen forgotten, my contributions minimized. Then came the accident. I was driving home from Noah's therapy appointment when a distracted driver ran a red light, crashing into the passenger side of my car. The impact spun me across the intersection, airbags deploying as my head snapped forward. When everything finally stopped moving, I sat stunned, pain radiating through my shoulder and chest. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands, calling Bob first. When he didn't answer, I tried Sam. The call went to voicemail after 4 rings. Finally, I called Dan. "Ellie? I'm in the middle of something important," he answered, irritation evident in his voice. "Dan, I've been in an accident," I managed, my voice trembling. "At Burnside and 23rd. The car is—" I looked at the crumpled metal of the passenger door. "It's bad." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Are you seriously hurt? Because I've got investors here right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I don't know. My chest hurts. The airbags went off. "Look, if you're talking, you're probably fine. Call an ambulance if you need to, but I really can't leave this meeting. These people flew in from San Francisco specifically to discuss our next funding round. Sam's in a planning session downtown. Maybe call Bob?" I tried. He's not answering. Another sigh. "Okay, well, can you get a rideshare to the hospital if you're worried? I'll try to swing by after my meeting wraps up." He paused. "And Noah has that science project presentation tonight, remember? He needs to be there by 7. The call ended before I could respond. I sat in the damaged car, emergency lights flashing, completely alone. An older woman approached from another car, concern etched on her face. "Honey, are you okay? I've called an ambulance. Just stay still." At the emergency room, doctors confirmed I had a concussion and a badly bruised sternum from the seatbelt. They wanted to keep me overnight for observation due to my age and the severity of the impact. I called home again, this time reaching Sam. "Mom, I'm so sorry about the accident," she said, sounding genuinely concerned but harried. "I just got out of my meeting. How bad is it?" I explained the doctor's recommendations, the painkillers already making my speech slightly slurred. "Oh, God, they want to keep you overnight? But Noah's presentation. Dan and I both have to be there. It's a major part of his grade." "I understand," I said automatically, though part of me wanted to scream. I had been helping Noah with that science project for weeks. I'd planned to sit proudly in the audience. "Maybe Dad can pick you up?" Sam suggested. "Your father isn't—" answering his phone. "That's weird. He said he'd be home for dinner." She paused. "Mom, I hate to ask, but if they're saying it's just for observation, could you possibly sign yourself out? We really need someone to be home when Noah gets off the bus. His presentation outfit is laid out, but he'll need help with his bow. Tie and his display board is in the garage. He gets so anxious about these things, and you're the best at calming him down. I closed my eyes, the hospital fluorescence suddenly too bright. Sam, I'm on painkillers. They're worried about the concussion. Right, of course. She sounded flustered. I'm sorry, that was selfish. Let me figure something out. Maybe I can ask Dan to leave work early. As if summoned by his name, I heard Dan's voice in the background. Is that your mom? Ask her if the car is drivable. I need it for a client breakfast tomorrow. Sam's voice became muffled as she covered the phone, but I could still hear them. She's in the hospital, Dan. Concussion and chest injuries. Hospital? Is it serious? Because we have Noah's thing tonight, and I have that breakfast meeting with Hayes tomorrow. His firm could double our next investment round. I know. Maybe we can pick her up on the way to Noah's presentation. She could rest in the car while we're inside. I hung up. I simply couldn't listen anymore. With shaking hands, I texted Sam. Staying overnight at doctor's insistence. Get a rideshare for your breakfast, Dan. Car is at impound. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Then I turned off my phone, something I hadn't done in years. Someone was always calling. Noah needed something, Sam was running late, Dan had a question about the household accounts. For the first time in 8 years, I decided they could manage without me for one night. The quiet hospital room felt oddly peaceful. A nurse came in to check my vitals, her manner brisk but kind. Family coming to stay with you? She asked, adjusting my IV. No, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. They had a prior commitment. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing, simply patting my hand before leaving. I stared at the ceiling, my body aching but my mind unexpectedly clear. Despite the concussion, despite the painkillers, I was thinking more clearly than I had in years. I had spent most of my adult life being capable, reliable Eleanor Martinez. First as a respected financial advisor, then as the family foundation. But somewhere along the way, reliability had transformed into invisibility. My capabilities had become expected, assumed, taken for granted. The accident could have been much worse. That thought kept circling in my mind. I could have died at that intersection, and my family's first concern would have been who would handle Noah's bow tie or drive Dan to his breakfast meeting. When had I allowed myself to become so diminished in their eyes? When had I accepted being treated as an amenity rather than a person? The questions followed me into an uneasy sleep, periodically interrupted by nurses checking my condition. Morning brought Sam rushing into my room, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her expression tense. Mom, your phone was off. We were worried, sick. I doubted that very much, but I kept my face neutral. The doctors suggested rest. How was Noah's presentation? It went well. She sat heavily in the visitor's chair. Though he missed you. Kept looking at the door. She rubbed her eyes. Dad finally called back last night. Apparently he was playing golf with Jeffrey and lost track of time. His phone was in his golf bag. I nodded, unsurprised. Bob's golf games had been getting longer and more frequent. Last week he'd come home smelling faintly of perfume. I wasn't naive. I suspected Jeffrey was actually Janice from his old engineering firm. But after 40 years of marriage, confronting that particular truth seemed exhausting. The doctor says I can go home this afternoon, I said instead. My chest is badly bruised, and I'll need to rest for a few days. Sam looked relieved. That's great. Dan had to take a rideshare to his breakfast meeting. He was pretty upset about the car. I stared at her, wondering if she could hear herself. I'm sure the concussion has been terribly inconvenient for him. She missed the sarcasm completely. It's just a really important meeting. This investor could make a huge difference for Wiltech. She checked her watch. I should get to work. We have a campaign launching next week. Can Dad pick you up when they release you? Don't worry about it. I'll manage. She kissed my forehead distractedly. Thanks, Mom. You're always so understanding. I've got to run, but text when you're home, okay? After she left, I called the one person I knew would come without hesitation, Pauline Chen, my former colleague who had become a close friend after my retirement. Unlike most of my professional connections, Pauline had stayed in touch, regularly, inviting me to lunch despite my increasingly frequent excuses about family obligations. Eleanor Martinez, she said when she answered. I was beginning to think you'd fallen off the planet. Lunch next month isn't soon enough. I need a favor, Pauline. I'm at Providence Hospital, car accident. Her tone changed immediately. I'm on my way. Don't move. Pauline arrived in 30 minutes, elegant as always in a perfectly tailored suit, concern evident on her face. After confirming I wasn't critically injured, she helped gather my belongings and handled the discharge paperwork with efficient authority. Where's that husband of yours? Or your daughter? She asked as she drove me home, careful to avoid potholes. That might jostle my injured chest. Bob's probably at the golf course. Sam's at work. Dan had an important breakfast meeting. Even saying it aloud made me wince at how it sounded. Pauline shot me a sharp look. And they couldn't rearrange anything for you? After a car accident? I looked out the window, watching Portland's familiar streets pass by. I've become convenient, reliable old mom, always there to handle everything. Even though you were one of the sharpest investment advisors Meridian ever had? Even though half those tech bros downtown would kill for 20 minutes of your insight? Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. It's ridiculous, Eleanor. You're the woman who spotted the market correction in '08, 6 months before anyone else. Now they can't be bothered to pick you up from the hospital? I hadn't thought about my professional reputation in years. Pauline's words pierced something tender inside me, a part of my identity I'd carefully packed away when I'd stepped into my grandmother role. When we arrived at the house, it was empty. Noah was at school, everyone else at work. Pauline helped me inside, frowning at the stairs leading to my in-law suite. You can't manage those with your injuries? Where else can you rest? I directed her to the main floor guest room, rarely used except when Dan's parents visited twice a year. It felt strange settling into the crisp, unfamiliar sheets. I should make something for Noah's after-school snack, I said, trying to sit up. He'll be home in a few hours. Pauline gently pushed me back against the pillows. For God's sake, Eleanor, you have a concussion. Let them handle their own snacks for once. She arranged pillows to support my injured chest. I'm staying until someone gets home. We need to talk anyway. I raised an eyebrow. About EM Ventures and its latest acquisition proposal. My breath caught. How did you know about that? Pauline smiled, settling into the armchair beside the bed. Jason Reed and I serve on the Harbor Foundation board together. He's never explicitly said it's you, but I'm not an idiot, Eleanor. EM Eleanor Martinez. The investment focus perfectly matches your specialties, and he always gets mysteriously busy whenever I mention your name. I closed my eyes briefly. I should have known Pauline would figure it out. It was supposed to be anonymous, just a way to help Sam and Noah have security. By bankrolling your son-in-law's company, the same son-in-law who, from what I've gathered, treats you like the help? It's not that simple. But even as I said it, I wondered if it actually was that simple. Had I allowed myself to be diminished in my own home while simultaneously enabling Dan's success from the shadows? Jason mentioned Wiltech is seeking another major funding round, Pauline continued. Apparently, your son-in-law is particularly eager to impress the mysterious EM Ventures, hoping for additional investment. Jason says Daniel talks about finally meeting the man behind the curtain. Despite my pain, I laughed. The man behind the curtain? Of course Dan assumes it's a man. Most of them do, Pauline agreed. That's how we've always gained our advantage. She leaned forward. Eleanor, I didn't just come today as your friend. Apex Group is looking to acquire a company exactly like Wiltec for our West Coast expansion. Jason hinted EM Ventures might be open to a discussion. My heart raced. Apex Group was one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country. An acquisition would multiply Wiltec's value exponentially, and my investment along with it. I haven't authorized any acquisition talks, I said carefully. No, but maybe you should consider it, especially if it comes with a board position. For EM Ventures' principal investor. Pauline's eyes sparkled. Imagine his face when he realizes who's been backing him all along and who he's been treating like a burden. The idea was tempting, deliciously, wickedly tempting. But something else Pauline said had caught my attention. He called me a burden? Pauline's expression shifted to one of caution. You didn't know? Jason mentioned a business dinner last month. Apparently, Daniel was explaining to potential investors why Wiltec needed this funding round to accelerate growth. He referenced family financial burdens and specifically mentioned supporting his wife's mother. The words hit harder than the car had. A burden. After everything I'd done, the investment that started his company, the household management that freed him to work those 18-hour days, the countless times I'd stepped in so he could pursue his ambitions. I was a burden? Eleanor? Pauline sounded concerned. Your face just went completely white. I'm fine, I said automatically, though I wasn't. Something was shifting inside me, tectonic plates of identity realigning. Tell me more about this acquisition opportunity. As Pauline outlined Apex's interest, my mind was already racing ahead. Not just to the potential acquisition, but to what came after. For 8 years, I had sublimated my needs, my identity, my very self to support this family. I had become invisible, a convenience rather than a person. But I wasn't just Grandma Ellie who packed lunches and scheduled appointments. I was still Eleanor Martinez, the woman who had once commanded respect throughout Portland's financial district. The woman who had secretly built EM Ventures into a formidable investment firm, while her family assumed she was just puttering around the house. Are you even listening? Pauline asked, interrupting my thoughts. I am. I shifted, wincing, at the pain in my chest. But I'm thinking beyond the acquisition now. I'm thinking it might be time for Eleanor Martinez to step out from behind the curtain completely. Pauline's slow smile told me she understood perfectly. Now that sounds like the Eleanor I used to know. The front door slammed, followed by Noah's excited voice. Grandma, are you home from the hospital? Pauline stood. Think about what I've said. Apex is moving quickly on this acquisition strategy. And for what it's worth, I think it's long past time you reclaimed your place at the table. She squeezed my hand. I'll see myself out. Call me when you're ready to discuss next steps. As she left, Noah burst into the room, his small face pinched with worry. He climbed carefully onto the bed beside me. Dad said you got hurt pretty bad. Are you going to be okay? I hugged him close, the only person in this house who still saw me clearly. I'm going to be better than okay, sweetheart. I think Grandma's about to wake up from a very long nap. Noah looked confused. But you never nap. You're always doing things for everybody. I smiled, a plan already forming in my mind. Exactly. And I think it's time everybody learned what happens when Grandma decides to do things for herself for a change. That evening, the house filled with the usual chaos of family dinner. Sam rushed in at 6:30, still taking work calls, her blazer draped over one arm as she juggled her laptop bag and phone. Dan arrived shortly after, his confident stride faltering slightly when he saw me seated at the dining table instead of serving from the kitchen as usual. Ellie, you're up, he said, surprise evident in his tone. We figured you'd be resting after your incident. Accident, I corrected mildly. And I am resting. Noah and I ordered delivery. I gestured to the Thai food containers spread across the table. Noah beamed beside me, proud of having helped place the order online. Dan's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Delivery? That's a bit extravagant for a weeknight, isn't it? Before I could respond, Bob wandered in, his hair slightly disheveled, smelling faintly of scotch and that same perfume. He stopped short when he saw me. Eleanor, you're home. I was going to pick you up tomorrow. The hospital released me today. Pauline drove me home. Pauline Chen? You haven't mentioned her in years. Bob looked uncomfortable as he took his seat. Why didn't you call me? I did, several times. I kept my voice neutral, aware of Noah watching this exchange with curious eyes. You didn't answer. An awkward silence fell, broken only by Sam's phone buzzing with another notification. She glanced at it, then at the food. Ty? Mom, you... No, Dan can't eat peanuts. What was wrong with the lasagna in the freezer? I'm not cleared to stand at the oven yet, I replied, passing Bob the container of pad thai. Doctor's orders after a concussion. Concussion? Bob repeated, finally seeming to register the situation. How bad was this accident? Bad enough for overnight hospitalization and painkillers that I'm still taking. I gestured to the pill. Bottle beside my water glass. The car is probably totaled. Passenger side impact at Burnside and 23rd. Jesus, Mom! Sam finally put down her phone, concern flickering across her face. Why didn't you make them understand how serious it was when you called? We would have come right away. The statement hung in the air, its inherent falsehood. So obvious that even Noah snorted softly beside me. Under different circumstances, I might have let it slide, offered reassurances, smoothed over the moment. But something fundamental had shifted inside me during those quiet hospital hours. Would you have? I asked, my voice still mild, but with an edge that made Sam blink in surprise. Because I distinctly remember explaining that I was in the emergency room with a concussion and chest injuries, and your first concern was whether I could sign myself out to help Noah with his bow tie. Sam flushed. That's not fair. I was just worried about his presentation. And Dan's primary concern was whether the car would be available for his breakfast meeting. Dan cleared his throat, reaching for the spring rolls. In my defense, I was in the middle of a crucial investor meeting when you called. And that breakfast was with Hayes Capital. They're considering a significant investment in Wiltech. A life-changing investment, I'm sure, I said, meeting his gaze evenly. Almost as life-changing as the car accident I'd just experienced. Dan set down his fork with deliberate care. Ellie, I understand you're upset, but there's no need for this. Dramatic reenactment at dinner. We all have responsibilities. Sometimes emergencies happen at inconvenient times. We adapt and move forward. Adapt, I repeated, testing the word. Like I've adapted to running this household while receiving not so much as a thank you? Like I've adapted to being treated as the help rather than a member of this family? Mom, Sam interjected, her tone caught between pleading and warning. You're on painkillers. Maybe this conversation should wait until you're feeling better. I'm thinking more clearly now than I have in years, I said, surprised by how steady my voice remained. Do you know what happens when you're alone in an emergency room, uncertain whether your chest pain is just bruising or something more serious? You gain perspective very quickly on what matters and what doesn't. Bob shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Why? We're family, aren't we? Shouldn't we be able to have honest conversations? I turned to Noah, softening my expression. Sweetheart, would you like to eat your dinner in the living room and watch that documentary we were talking about earlier? The adults need to have a discussion. Noah looked reluctant to miss whatever was unfolding, but nodded and took his plate to the living room. Once he was out of earshot, I turned back to the table. Yesterday made something abundantly clear to me. Somewhere along the way, I've allowed myself to become invisible in this family. I've become a function rather than a person. The one who cooks, cleans, handles the bills, drives Noah to appointments. And when I was suddenly unable to perform those functions, not one of you thought about my well-being first. You thought about the inconvenience to yourselves. Dan leaned back, crossing his arms defensively. That's hardly fair. We all appreciate what you do around here, but you can't expect the world to stop turning because of a fender bender. I felt a flash of genuine anger, the first I'd allowed myself to feel in years. A fender bender? I was hospitalized overnight with a concussion and chest trauma. The airbags deployed. The car is likely totaled. But please, tell me more about your important breakfast meeting. Sam reached across the table for my hand, which I carefully moved away. Mom, we're sorry. We should have been there for you. But you've always been so capable, so independent. You never needed anyone to take care of you before. Everyone needs care sometimes, Samantha. Everyone deserves basic consideration. When was the last time any of you asked how I was doing? Not what I was doing for you, but how I was. The silence that followed was answer enough. Bob cleared his throat. You've seemed fine. Busy with Noah and the house, but fine. Fine, I echoed. The benchmark of a fulfilling existence. I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. Do you know what else I realized in that hospital room? I've become a financial burden in my son-in-law's eyes, despite the fact that Bob and I own this house outright, despite the fact that we cover most of the household expenses. Dan's head snapped up. I never said you were a burden. You said, exactly that, Daniel, to Jason Reed at the investor dinner last month. The look of shock on his face confirmed Pauline's information. You specifically mentioned family financial burdens and supporting your wife's mother as a reason Wiltec needed additional funding. Dan paled slightly. That was taken completely out of context. I was explaining our accelerated growth strategy. By using me as your excuse for needing more money? When Bob and I pay the property taxes, utilities, and most of the groceries for this household? I kept my voice level, but inside, decades of financial acumen were reasserting themselves, calculating exactly how much we had subsidized their lifestyle over the years. Tell me, what exactly is the burden that I represent to you? Sam jumped in, her marketing instincts clearly sensing a PR disaster unfolding at her dining table. Mom, Dan didn't mean it like that. We're all under a lot of pressure right now. Wiltec is at a critical growth stage. My department is facing budget cuts, and with Noah's therapies. Noah's therapies that I research, schedule, and take. Him too, I finished for her. The appointments I've never once complained about because I love that boy more than anything in this world. We know that, Sam said quickly. And we're grateful. So grateful. Grateful people show gratitude, Samantha. They don't refer to the people helping them as burdens behind their backs. Dan pushed his plate away, his expression hardening, into the confident CEO mask I'd seen him perfect over the years. Look, Ellie, I apologize if my words were misconstrued or reported back to you inaccurately. Business language can sometimes sound colder than intended. But the fact remains that running a startup while supporting a multi-generational household is challenging. I'm trying to build something significant here, something that will benefit all of us in the long run, including you and Bob. I studied him for a moment, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Ambitious? Yes. Hardworking, certainly. But also entitled, accustomed to the invisible support system that allowed his ambition to flourish unchecked. And I appreciate that, Dan. I genuinely do. But I'm not a line item on your balance sheet. I'm a person who deserves basic respect and consideration. Of course you do, he said smoothly, clearly thinking the crisis was being averted. And once Wiltec completes this next funding round, things will ease up considerably. Hayes Capital is particularly interested in our expansion into predictive analytics. Jason thinks we could be looking at a valuation 3 times our current one. The casual mention of Wiltech's business prospects, as if that were the real issue at hand, struck me as so absurdly tone-deaf that I nearly laughed. Instead, I found myself asking, "And what does EM Ventures think of this valuation?" The table went silent. Dan's expression froze, then shifted to confusion, then cautious interest. EM Ventures? How do you know about them? I shrugged. Slightly, wincing at the pain the movement caused in my chest. You mentioned them before. Your primary investor, right? The mysterious entity that provided your seed funding. Dan's eyes narrowed suspiciously. I've never discussed them at home. That information is confidential. Only the executive team knows the details of our cap table. You'd be surprised what I pick up, Daniel. I'm not just here to cook and clean, you know. I do occasionally listen. When you discuss business matters. Something shifted in his expression. A newfound wariness, perhaps even a flicker of respect. EM Ventures has been interested, but cautious about this round. Jason handles most of the communication with them. They're notoriously private. Perhaps they're waiting to see how you handle this expansion phase, I suggested mildly. Some investors prefer to evaluate leadership under pressure before committing additional capital. Dan stared at me, clearly reassessing. That's actually a sophisticated analysis, Ellie. I didn't realize you followed investment strategies. There's quite a lot you don't realize about me. I pushed back from the table, the effort causing a sharp pain in my bruised sternum. Now if you'll... Excuse me, these painkillers are making me drowsy. I think I'll join Noah for that documentary before turning in. As I stood, Sam finally seemed to register the full extent of our conversation. Mom, wait, this feels unfinished. Are you unhappy living here? The question was so fundamentally inadequate to the situation that it momentarily left me speechless. Unhappy didn't begin to cover the slow erosion of identity I'd experienced, the gradual diminishment of my personhood to a set of functions this family required. What I am, Samantha, is awakening to the reality of my situation. For 8 years, I've sublimated every aspect of myself to support this family arrangement. I've been patient, accommodating, reliable, and in return, I've become invisible, except when I fail to perform as expected. I straightened despite the pain, reclaiming a posture I hadn't used since my professional days. That changes now. I left them sitting at the table, expressions ranging from confusion to concern to calculation. In the living room, Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, the documentary still playing softly. I covered him with a throw blanket and sat beside him, gently stroking his hair. For this child, I would have endured far worse than I had. But the realization dawning on me now was that my self-erasure wasn't actually helping him, or anyone, in the long run. By allowing myself to be diminished, I was modeling exactly the wrong lesson for the person I loved most in this world. I dozed fitfully that night, my injuries making it difficult to find a comfortable position. Around 2 a.m, I heard voices downstairs, Sam and Dan arguing in fierce whispers that occasionally rose in volume before being hastily hushed. Can't believe you actually called her a burden to investors. Taken completely out of context. Doesn't matter. My mother. Without her, we couldn't. Don't remember you objecting when I covered your credit card debt last year. I didn't strain to hear more. Their arguments weren't my concern anymore. Instead, I reached for my phone and sent a text to Pauline. Let's discuss Apex's acquisition. Interest. Breakfast tomorrow? Her response came immediately, despite the hour. About damn time. 8 a.m., Proudfoot coffee. I'll bring the paperwork. Morning brought a house unnaturally quiet for a weekday. I made my way carefully downstairs to find a note on the kitchen counter in Sam's handwriting. Mom, took Noah to school. Dan had early meeting. Dad went golfing. Rest, please. We'll talk tonight. Love you. The empty house felt like a luxury after years of constant demands. I showered slowly, mindful of my injuries, then dressed in clothes I hadn't worn in years, a tailored pantsuit that had once been my professional uniform, slightly looser now but still elegant. I applied makeup carefully, styled my hair, and added the pearl earrings Bob had given me on our 20th anniversary. The woman who looked back from the mirror was still Eleanor Martinez, financial advisor and investment strategist. She had simply been dormant, not gone. Pauline was already at Proudfoot when I arrived, 2 folders and a laptop laid out on the table beside her coffee. Her eyebrows rose appreciatively at my appearance. Well, well, look who's back from the dead. Not dead, just sleepwalking for about 8 years. I settled into the chair across from her, wincing slightly at the pain in my chest. Should you be out and about with those injuries? She asked, pushing a cappuccino toward me. Probably not. But I've spent enough time accommodating everyone else's schedule. Today, I set mine. I took a sip of the coffee, savoring the familiar ritual of a business meeting. Tell me about Apex's interest in Wiltech. Pauline didn't waste time. She opened the first folder, revealing a detailed analysis of Wiltech's market position, technological assets, and growth potential. Apex wants to establish a stronger foothold in predictive analytics, especially for retail applications. Wiltech's algorithm is impressive, miles ahead of competitors, but they lack the infrastructure for true scaling. Apex can provide that instantly. And the offer? 4 times current market valuation, structured as 60% cash, 40% Apex stock. She slid a document toward me. They're also offering 3 board seats to current Wiltech leadership. One would naturally go to EM Ventures as the primary investor. I studied the figures, my old instincts quickly resurfacing. The offer was excellent, better than Wiltech could hope to achieve independently for at least 3 more years. Dan would likely object initially. His ego was heavily invested in building an empire under his own name. But the financial case was irrefutable. What's your interest in this, Pauline? Beyond helping an old friend? She smiled, stirring her coffee. Finder's fee, of course. Plus, I must admit I'm rather enjoying the thought of you reclaiming your place in Portland's business community. You've been missed, Eleanor. More than you know. I considered her words, feeling a curious mixture of emotions. Pride in the knowledge that my professional reputation had endured, regret for the years I'd spent diminishing myself, determination, not to waste another day. I'm not looking to humiliate Dan, I said finally. Despite everything, he's still Sam's husband and Noah's father. This needs to be handled carefully. Agreed. But there's a difference between humiliation and a necessary readjustment of perspective. Pauline leaned forward. He needs to understand exactly who he's been dismissing all these years, who he's called a burden while simultaneously benefiting from your investment acumen. She was right, of course. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my identity and ensuring that the next phase of my life would be lived on my terms, not anyone else's. Here's what I propose, I said, shifting into the negotiation mindset that had once been second nature. We move forward with the acquisition talks, but without revealing EM Ventures' identity yet. I want to observe how Dan handles this process, whether he prioritizes his ego or the company's best interests. And if he chooses ego? Then I'll know exactly where things stand before showing my hand. I took another sip of coffee. Meanwhile, I need to have some frank conversations with my family about our living arrangements going forward. Pauline raised an eyebrow. You're considering moving out? I'm considering all options, including asking them to move out, given that Bob and I own the house. I sighed, thinking of Noah. But there are complications. Noah needs stability, routine. His therapy progress has been significant, but disruptions can set him back. And you love that boy. More than anything. I squared my shoulders, decision made. Let's proceed with the acquisition discussions. I'll attend as Eleanor Martinez, financial consultant to Apex, not as EM Ventures. Let's see if Dan recognizes what I bring to the table when I'm not serving dinner on it. Pauline grinned. Now that's the Eleanor I remember. She pushed the second folder toward me. Acquisition timeline and integration strategy. Review at your leisure. Apex wants to move quickly. They're hoping to announce before quarter's end. After finishing our meeting, I asked Pauline to drop me at the dealership. My car was indeed totaled, and I spent the next hour selecting a replacement. Not another practical sedan, but a sleek mid-sized SUV in deep metallic blue. When the salesman asked if I wanted to consult my husband before finalizing, I fixed him with a look that made him backpedal immediately. Just need your signature here, Ms. Martinez. And congratulations on your new vehicle. I drove my new car home, enjoying the scent of leather and the feeling of making a significant purchase without consulting anyone else. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Bob's golf clubs were still missing from the garage. No surprise there. Inside, I found the house still empty. Perfect. I made my way to the study, ostensibly Bob's domain, though he rarely used it, and settled at the desk. From the bottom drawer, I retrieved our household financial records, including property documents, insurance policies, and investment statements. For the next several hours, I meticulously reviewed our financial entanglements with Sam and Dan's family. The picture that emerged confirmed what I already suspected. Bob and I had been subsidizing their lifestyle to a significant degree. Beyond the mortgage-free housing, we covered utilities, property taxes, most grocery expenses, and Noah's school tuition. Dan's complaint about supporting me was not just insulting, it was factually incorrect. I created a detailed spreadsheet outlining these contributions, then drafted a proposal for a more equitable arrangement going forward. They would need to cover their fair share of household expenses if they wished to continue this living situation. Alternatively, they could purchase the house from us at market value, allowing Bob and me to relocate. As I worked, I felt a familiar satisfaction, the pleasure of bringing clarity to complex financial matters, of finding solutions based on data rather than emotion. This had always been my strength, long before I became Grandma Ellie. My phone buzzed with a text from Pauline. Meeting set with Wiltec tomorrow, 2 p.m. Apex offices downtown. Jason knows you're coming as my financial consultant. Dan doesn't know anything yet. I smiled, anticipation building. I'll be there, I replied. Just as I was closing the spreadsheets, I heard the front door open, followed by Noah's excited voice calling, "Grandma, where are you? Mom says you're supposed to be resting." I saved my work and closed the laptop as Noah bounded into the study, his backpack still on, eyes wide with excitement. "Grandma, you look different," he exclaimed, taking in my business attire. "You look like Principal Davies when she meets with important people." I laughed, pulling him into a gentle hug mindful of my injuries. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's quite a compliment." Sam appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Mom, should you be up working? The doctor said you needed rest." "I'm feeling much better today," I replied calmly. "And I had some matters that needed attention." Her eyes traveled to the financial documents spread across the desk, then to my outfit, and finally to the car keys visible on the edge of the desk. "You went out? In your condition? Why didn't you call me if you needed something?" "I didn't need anything, Samantha. I had business to attend to." "Business?" She looked genuinely confused. "What business?" The question was so revealing of how she perceived me now, as someone without professional interests or capabilities, that it momentarily took my breath away. Had she genuinely forgotten who I had been before becoming her childcare solution? Noah, sweetie, I said, turning to my grandson. Would you mind starting your homework in the kitchen? I'll be there to help in a few minutes after I talk with your mom. Once he was gone, I gestured for Sam to sit. Samantha, I've been doing some financial analysis of our household arrangement. Her face immediately tensed. Mom, if this is about what Dan said, that burden comment, I've already talked to him about it. He feels terrible. He didn't mean it the way it sounded. This isn't about hurt feelings, I said, keeping my voice level. This is about clarity and fairness. Going forward. The fact is, your father and I have been subsidizing your family's lifestyle significantly for 8 years now. That was a choice we made willingly to help you during a challenging time. But it seems that arrangement has created some misperceptions about who is supporting whom. Sam's face flushed. We've never taken you for granted, Mom. We know you and Dad have been incredibly generous with the house. It's not just the house, Samantha. I slid the spreadsheet toward her. We pay approximately 73% of all household expenses, including Noah's private school tuition. We provide childcare that would cost you approximately $40,000 annually if you hired someone. And we do this while being treated as if we're the ones receiving charity. She stared at the numbers, her marketing-trained eyes quickly scanning the data. Mom, we never meant to. This just evolved over time. We always intended to take on more expenses once Wiltech became profitable. Wiltech has been profitable for 3 years now, I pointed out. Yet our arrangement hasn't changed. Sam looked up, her expression stricken. Are you asking us to move out? I'm asking for an honest conversation about our living situation and mutual expectations. I'm asking to be treated as a person of value, not just a convenient service provider. And yes, I'm asking for financial equity if we continue to share this household. Of course, she said quickly. We can definitely contribute more. I'll talk to Dan tonight. This isn't just about money, Samantha. It's about respect. Yesterday made it abundantly clear that somewhere along the way, I became invisible to this family except when I failed to fulfill my assigned functions. Sam reached across the desk, taking my hand. This time I didn't pull away. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never intended for you to feel that way. We've all just been so caught up in our own struggles. Dan with Wiltech, me with work pressures, Noah with his challenges. We've taken you for granted because you've always been our rock. I understand that, I said, softening slightly. And I don't regret stepping in when Noah needed me. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But I need you to understand that I'm not just Grandma Ellie. I'm still Eleanor Martinez. I still have value beyond what I contribute to this household. Sam nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I know that. I've always known that. I just forgot to show it. She glanced at my outfit again. So, this business you mentioned, I'm consulting on a financial matter tomorrow. An acquisition discussion for a tech company. I kept my tone deliberately casual. Which reminds me, Dan doesn't need to know about this yet. It's confidential. Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. Of course, client confidentiality. I understand. She hesitated, then added, It's good to see you like this, Mom. You seem more like yourself than you have in years. I am more like myself, I agreed, and I intend to stay that way. The conversation was interrupted by Noah calling from the kitchen. Grandma, I need help with my fractions. Sam stood, wiping her eyes quickly. I should start dinner. Dad texted that he'll be home late, and Dan has a strategy session with Jason until at least 8. She paused at the door. We'll make this right, Mom, I promise. I nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to give her the chance. We'll talk more tomorrow, after my meeting. As Sam left, I gathered the financial documents, tucking them back into the desk drawer. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Facing Dan across a conference table rather than a dining table, positioning myself as Eleanor the financial strategist rather than Ellie the grandmother. The prospect should have been intimidating after 8 years away from the business world. Instead, I felt a sense of rightness, of returning to myself after a long absence. The accident had been a wake-up call in more ways than one. Life could end in an instant, a fact I'd apparently needed to be reminded of at 58. And I was no longer willing to spend whatever time I had left being diminished, taken for granted, or treated as a burden by the very people who relied on me most. As I joined Noah in the kitchen, helping him navigate the complexities of fractions while Sam prepared dinner, I felt a curious sense of anticipation. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow, not because of what I would do for others, but because of what I would reclaim for myself. The Apex Group's downtown offices occupied the top 3 floors of Portland's most prestigious business tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city and Mount Hood beyond, an appropriate backdrop for the high-stakes discussions about to unfold. I arrived 15 minutes early, taking the private elevator directly to the executive floor where Pauline waited in the reception area. "You look formidable," she said approvingly, taking in my charcoal gray suit and crisp white blouse. I'd paired the outfit with a simple silver pendant that had been my signature accessory during my advisory years. That's the idea. I ignored the persistent ache in my chest, a reminder of the accident that had catalyzed this transformation. "Has Dan arrived yet?" "Not yet. Jason is already in the conference room with the Apex team, reviewing the preliminary valuation models." She lowered her voice. "I gave Jason a heads up that your EM Ventures." He nearly fell out of his chair. I couldn't help smiling at that image. Jason had always been astute but easily flustered. And his reaction? Once he recovered from the shock, he seemed almost relieved. Said it explained a lot about the mysterious investor's uncanny instincts for tech market trends. Pauline checked her watch. "Dan should be here any minute. Remember, officially, you're just my financial consultant today." "Eleanor Martinez, Pauline Chen Associates," I confirmed. "No mention of EM Ventures yet." "Perfect. Let me know when you want to drop that particular bombshell." I've got my camera ready to capture his expression. I laughed despite my nerves. "This isn't about humiliating him, Pauline." "Of course not," she agreed, though her eyes sparkled mischievously. "It's about restoring the natural order of things." The elevator doors opened, revealing Dan in his power suit, navy blue with subtle pinstripes, his red tie a bold contrast. He carried his premium leather portfolio, a birthday gift I'd given him 3 years earlier. His confident stride faltered momentarily when he spotted me standing beside Pauline. "Ellie?" Confusion flickered across his face. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Daniel." I extended my hand professionally, as if we were meeting for the first time. "Eleanor Martinez. I'm consulting with Ms. Chen on this acquisition discussion." He shook my hand automatically, his bewilderment evident. "You're consulting on an acquisition? I don't understand." "Ms. Martinez was one of Portland's top financial advisors before her retirement," Pauline interjected smoothly. "Her expertise in tech valuations is unparalleled. We're fortunate she agreed to assist with this negotiation." Dan's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and finally a thin veneer of composure. "I had no idea. You never mentioned this background, Ellie." "You never asked," I replied simply. "And it's Eleanor in professional settings." Before he could respond, Jason emerged from the conference room, his face carefully neutral despite knowing the true situation. "Dan, glad you could make it. The Apex team is ready to begin the presentation." Dan nodded, still visibly processing my unexpected presence. "Of course. Lead the way." As we entered the conference room, I felt a curious sense of homecoming. The sleek table, the subtle scent of coffee and cologne, the purposeful energy. This had been my world for decades before I'd stepped away to support my family. I took a seat directly across from Dan, arranging my materials with practiced precision. Andrew Kendrick, Apex's acquisition director, began the presentation with practiced efficiency. Wiltech's predictive analytics platform represents exactly the kind of innovation Apex seeks to incorporate into our ecosystem. Our engineers have reviewed your codebase and are impressed with both the algorithm's accuracy and its scalability potential. Dan recovered quickly, professional instincts kicking in as he listened to Apex outline their interest. His posture straightened, expression sharpening into focused attention. This was Dan in his element, confident, articulate, strategic. I had to admit, he was good at this part of his job. We've developed proprietary techniques that allow for significantly faster processing of unstructured data, he explained, his previous confusion temporarily forgotten as he described Wiltech's technical advantages. Our accuracy rates are 17% higher than the industry standard, particularly for retail behavioral prediction. The discussion continued for nearly an hour, technical details giving way to market positioning strategies and potential integration pathways. I remained silent, observing Dan as he navigated the conversation skillfully. He was clearly in his comfort zone, far removed from the dismissive son-in-law who couldn't be bothered to pick me up from the hospital. Finally, Andrew reached the critical portion of the presentation. Now, let's discuss the financial structure of our proposed acquisition. Slides appeared showing Apex's valuation of Wiltech, precisely the figures Pauline had shared with me the previous day. Dan's eyebrows rose appreciatively at the numbers. That's a significant premium over our last internal valuation. We believe Wiltech's technology justifies it, Andrew confirmed. However, we're particularly interested in ensuring alignment with your primary investor, EM Ventures. Our understanding is they control 48% of equity currently. Dan shifted slightly, glancing at Jason. That's correct. Jason handles most of our communication with EM Ventures. And what's your sense of their potential interest in this acquisition? Andrew pressed. Before Jason could respond, I leaned forward slightly. If I may, I began, my voice carrying the quiet authority I'd cultivated over decades in boardrooms. The valuation appears reasonable based on current market multiples for predictive analytics platforms. However, there are questions about the proposed integration timeline that might concern a significant stakeholder. All eyes turned to me, Dan's narrowing slightly. With all due respect, Ms. Martinez, our relationship with EM Ventures is handled directly by our executive team. Of course, I replied smoothly. I'm merely offering an objective financial perspective. The proposed 60-40 cash-to-equity split, for instance, might be reconsidered to provide greater upside potential for current investors. Apex's growth trajectory suggests additional value creation over the next 3 to 5 years that isn't fully captured in today's cash offer. Andrew looked intrigued. You're suggesting a higher equity component? 50-50 would better reflect the long-term value Wiltech's technology brings to Apex, I countered. Particularly considering the integration synergies outlined in your presentation. Dan stared at me, clearly struggling to reconcile this version of his mother-in-law with the woman who cooked his dinners and picked up his son from school. I'm sorry, but how exactly are you qualified to make these assessments? This is a highly technical valuation of proprietary technology. The room went silent at his dismissive tone. Pauline raised an eyebrow but remained silent, letting me handle the moment. I specialized in tech valuations during my 20-year career at Meridian Financial, I replied evenly. I led their emerging technology investment division for 15 of those years, where we consistently outperformed market benchmarks by identifying undervalued innovations. I've personally overseen more than 30 tech acquisitions with an aggregate value exceeding $4 billion. Jason coughed lightly, a transparent attempt to mask his discomfort as Dan's expression shifted from dismissive to shocked. That's... I had no idea, Dan stammered. As I mentioned earlier, you never asked. I turned back to Andrew. Beyond the equity ratio adjustment, I would also recommend structured earnouts tied to integration milestones. This would align incentives for both companies during the critical first 18 months post-acquisition. Andrew nodded enthusiastically. Excellent suggestion, Ms. Martinez. We'd be open to exploring that structure. The meeting continued with Dan growing increasingly quiet, his earlier confidence visibly eroding as I engaged with the Apex team on sophisticated financial and strategic considerations. My suggestions were met with appreciative nods from Andrew and his team, while Jason watched the dynamic shift with barely concealed fascination. When the formal presentation concluded, Andrew stood to shake hands. We'll revise our proposal based on today's discussion. Ms. Martinez, your insights have been invaluable. I hope you'll continue to be involved as we move forward. I expect to be, I replied with a small smile. As the Apex team gathered their materials, Dan finally found his voice again. Eleanor, could I have a word with you privately before you leave? Of course. I nodded to Pauline, who gave me a subtle thumbs up as she left with the others. When the room had cleared, Dan closed the door and turned to me, his expression a mixture of confusion and something approaching respect. What exactly is happening here? Yesterday you were home recovering from an accident, and today you're advising on a multi-million-dollar acquisition? I'm reclaiming a part of myself, Daniel, a part I set aside to help Sam and Noah when they needed me. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. But this level of expertise, why have you never mentioned any of this before? We've discussed Wiltech's financial strategy hundreds of times at home, and you never once indicated you had this kind of background. Would you have listened? I asked quietly. Or would you have dismissed my input the way you dismissed me? When I called from the accident scene? The words hit their mark. Dan had the grace to look uncomfortable. I've already apologized for that. It was a momentary lapse in judgment during a stressful situation. It wasn't momentary. Though, was it? It was representative of how you've come to see me, as a convenience when I'm serving your needs, and an inconvenience when I require anything for myself. He opened his mouth to object, then closed it again, visibly recalibrating. Look, I clearly underestimated you, and that's on me. But this sudden involvement in Wiltech's business feels, I don't know, vindictive somehow? Like you're trying to prove a point at my expense. I'm not trying to damage Wiltech, Daniel. If anything, I've just helped improve the terms of a potential acquisition that could be tremendously beneficial for everyone involved. But yes, there is a point being made here, and I won't pretend otherwise. And that point is that I am more than what you've reduced me to. I gathered my belongings, slipping my notes into my portfolio. There's something else you should... No, but not here. I think this conversation should continue at home, with Sam present. His brow furrowed. What is this about, Ellie? It's about EM Ventures, I said simply. And it's Eleanor, please. I left him standing there, confusion evident in his expression. As I stepped into the hallway, Pauline was waiting, a knowing smile on her face. That went well, she observed. Are you going to tell him tonight? Yes. It's time for complete transparency. No more shadows, no more diminishment. I squared my shoulders, ignoring the twinge of pain from my accident injuries. I've arranged for a family dinner tonight. Even Bob will be there, assuming he can tear himself away from the golf course, or wherever he's actually spending his time these days. Pauline gave me a quick hug. Call me after. I want every detail of his face when you tell him. The drive home gave me time to prepare, mentally, for what was coming. This wasn't just about revealing myself as EM Ventures. It was about fundamentally resetting the power dynamics within my family, about reclaiming respect that should never have been lost in the first place. When I arrived, the house was unusually quiet. Noah was at his weekly therapy session, which Sam normally attended. Instead, I found her sitting at the kitchen island, staring intently at her laptop. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. "How was your meeting?" "Productive," I replied, setting down my portfolio. "Where's Noah?" "Dad took him to therapy. I told him I needed to finish some work." She closed her laptop slowly. "But that's not exactly true. I've been researching something." I raised an eyebrow, slipping off my suit jacket. "Oh?" "Eleanor Martinez, Senior Investment Advisor, Meridian Financial." She turned her laptop toward me, revealing an archived professional profile complete with my photograph from years earlier. 20-year career specializing in tech investments, recipient of the Northwest Financial Excellence Award 3 consecutive years, led Meridian's most profitable division for 15 years. She looked up at me, eyes wide. "Mom, you were a big deal." I couldn't help but smile at her shocked expression. "I was reasonably successful, yes." "Reasonably successful? Mom, this profile says you personally managed over $2 billion in assets. There are articles about your investment strategies in the Wall Street Journal." She shook her head in disbelief. "How did I not know any of this? I mean, I knew you worked in finance, but this is different. When you were growing up, I was just mom to you, not Eleanor the investment advisor. And when I stepped away to help with Noah, it didn't seem relevant anymore." I sat down across from her. "But yesterday in the hospital, I realized I've allowed that part of myself to be forgotten. Not just by you and Dan, but nearly by me as well." Sam scrolled through more search results. "There are dozens of articles about your investment predictions, your market analyses. You were quoted as an expert constantly." She looked up, her expression stricken. "And we've been treating you like a convenient household fixture," I finished for her. "Yes." She pushed the laptop away, distress evident in her posture. "I feel horrible, Mom. Not just because of how we've treated you, but because I never even bothered to know this fundamental thing about you. What kind of daughter doesn't know her mother was a financial powerhouse?" "The kind whose mother never insisted on being fully seen," I said gently. "That's on me as much as you. I stepped into the role you needed, reliable grandmother, household manager, and I let everything else fade away. But the accident made me realize that was a mistake. For all of us." Sam reached across the island to take my hand. "The financial analysis you showed me yesterday, that wasn't just basic household accounting, was it? That was you using skills you've honed over decades." "Old habits die hard," I acknowledged with a small smile. She shook her head, still processing. "So the meeting today, it wasn't just some random consulting work, was it? It was something significant." "It was about WillTech, actually." I watched her expression shift to surprise. "Apex Group is interested in acquiring the company. They presented their initial offer today." "Wait, you were at Dan's acquisition meeting? As what, exactly?" "Officially as a financial consultant for Pauline Chen. But there's more to it than that, Samantha. I've arranged for us all to have dinner together tonight. You, me, Dan, your father, if he can be bothered to show up, and Noah after his therapy. There are some things that need to be said, with everyone present." Sam studied my face, concern growing in her eyes. "Mom, what's going on? You're starting to worry me." "Nothing to worry about," I assured her. "Just truth that's long overdue." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening, followed by Noah's excited voice. "Mom, Grandma, guess what? I did the whole obstacle course today without stopping." I smiled, momentarily setting aside the weightier matters at hand. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I want to hear all about it." Bob appeared behind Noah, looking slightly uncomfortable in my presence after his absence during my hospitalization. "Eleanor, you're looking professional today." "I had a business meeting," I replied evenly. "Thank you for taking Noah to therapy." He nodded, clearly uncertain how to navigate this new dynamic between us. "It was no trouble. I'm, going to clean up before dinner." As he retreated upstairs, Sam gave me a meaningful look. "Dad's been acting strange since your accident. Almost guilty." "As well he might," I murmured, but didn't elaborate. Bob's apparent affair was a separate issue, one I wasn't ready to address yet. One family earthquake at a time. We spent the next hour helping Noah with his homework while I marinated chicken for dinner, not because I felt obligated to cook, but because I wanted the comfort of a familiar task before the confrontation to come. Sam set the table without being asked, a small but noticeable shift in household dynamics. Dan arrived home just after 6, his expression guarded as he entered the kitchen. He nodded stiffly to me, his eyes taking in my still professional attire. "Eleanor, the Apex team was impressed with your input today." "I'm glad to hear it." I gestured to the table. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. I thought we could all eat together tonight. There are matters we need to discuss." He looked like he wanted to press for details immediately but thought better of it. "Fine, I'll go change." By 6:30, we were all seated around the dining table, a rare occurrence in recent months, as Dan often ate late or in his home office, while Bob increasingly made excuses to be elsewhere. Noah chattered happily about his therapy session, accomplishments, seemingly oblivious to the tension circulating among the adults. When we'd finished the main course, I cleared my throat, drawing everyone's attention. "I've asked us to gather tonight because there are some truths that need to be acknowledged. The accident forced me to reevaluate many things, including my role in this family, and how I've allowed myself to be perceived." Dan shifted uncomfortably, while Sam reached for my hand in silent support. Bob looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Samantha has already learned part of this today, but for those who don't know, before I stepped away to help with Noah, I was a senior investment advisor at Meridian Financial, specializing in tech investments. I led their emerging technology division for 15 years and managed a portfolio worth billions. Bob had the decency to look ashamed. He, at least, had known who I was when we were both working, before he'd reduced me to a convenient housekeeper in his mind. Noah looked impressed, while Dan maintained a careful poker face. "Which brings me to Wiltec," I continued, turning my gaze directly to Dan. "When you were struggling to find seed funding 8 years ago, I saw potential in your technology. I believed it could provide security for Samantha and Noah during a challenging time, so I created an investment vehicle specifically for that purpose." Dan's expression shifted from neutral to confused. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying, Daniel, that EM Ventures is me, Eleanor Martinez. I've been your primary investor from the beginning." The silence that followed was absolute. Noah looked between the adults, sensing the seismic shift without fully understanding it. Sam's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Bob's eyebrows shot up, genuine surprise replacing his earlier discomfort. Dan's face went through a remarkable series of expressions: disbelief, denial, calculation, and finally, a dawning horror as he recalled every dismissive comment, every time he'd referred to me as a burden, knowing I was within earshot. That's not possible," he finally managed. "EM Ventures is a sophisticated investment firm with multiple holdings. EM Ventures is me," I repeated calmly. The multiple holdings were my previous investments, consolidated under the new entity. Jason Reed served as my proxy for board meetings and communications, but the investment decisions were always mine. Jason knew about this? Dan's voice had risen an octave. He's known from the beginning. It was essential to have someone representing my interests directly, though I remained anonymous to prevent any family complications. I paused, allowing the irony to settle. I never intended to reveal myself as your investor. I was content to support you from the shadows while focusing on Noah and the household. But recent events have made it clear that this arrangement is no longer tenable. Dan's expression had shifted again, this time to something approaching panic. The Apex acquisition. You knew about it before today. Yes. Pauline approached me last week. The offer is excellent, Dan. Accepting it would be a smart business decision. His professional mask slipped completely now, raw emotion breaking through. So all those questions, those suggestions in the meeting today, you weren't just some random consultant. You were deliberately undermining my position. On the contrary, I was strengthening it. The revised terms I suggested would significantly increase the value for all shareholders, including you. I held his gaze steadily. If I wanted to undermine you, I could have simply blocked the acquisition entirely. I control 48% of Wiltec, remember? The reminder of my ownership stake landed like a physical blow. Dan pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. This is unbelievable. All this time you've been what? Secretly evaluating my performance? Judging my business decisions while pretending to be just the helpful mother-in-law? Making dinner while controlling my company's future? I invested because I believed in your technology and wanted to help secure my daughter's future, I clarified. I remained anonymous because I wanted to support you without complicating family dynamics. But yes, I've watched your business decisions closely. It would be irresponsible not to, given the size of my investment. Sam finally found her voice. Mom, I can't believe you never told me. All these years. Would it have made a difference, Samantha? Or would it have simply created tension between you and Dan? I made a choice I thought would best support both of you during a difficult time. I turned back to Dan. What I did not anticipate was becoming invisible in my own home, or being referred to as a financial burden by the very person whose company I financed. Dan flinched visibly at the reminder. That comment was taken out of context. I never meant. You called my mother a burden? Sam interrupted, her tone incredulous. When? It was a casual remark during a business dinner, Dan said defensively. I was explaining our growth targets to potential investors. By using me as your excuse, I added. Despite the fact that Bob and I cover the majority of household expenses, including the house itself, utilities, and Noah's tuition. Sam turned to Dan, her expression hardening. You complained about supporting my mother to investors? When she's the one who funded your entire company? When she's been raising our son while we built our careers? Bob, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. Eleanor, why didn't you tell me about the investment? That was a significant financial decision to make unilaterally. I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. The same reason you didn't tell me about Janice from your old engineering firm. Some conversations seemed unnecessary at the time. His face went pale. That's not... I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence, on top of everything else, Robert. Your golf games have been getting remarkably long, and Janice's perfume is quite distinctive. I kept my tone matter-of-fact for Noah's sake, though the boy was watching wide-eyed, clearly absorbing far more than any of us would have preferred. Bob had the decency to look ashamed, staring down at his plate. I returned my attention to Dan, who was still standing, his hands gripping the back of his chair. To be clear, I'm not revealing this information to punish you or to assert control over Wiltec. I'm doing it because I refuse to continue being diminished in this family, while simultaneously enabling your success from the shadows. The accident made me realize life is too short for such arrangements. So what happens now? He asked, his voice strained. You leverage your ownership to force the Apex acquisition? Take your money and leave us all behind? That depends entirely on you, Daniel. The acquisition makes good business sense, but I'm not forcing that decision. What I am doing is reclaiming my place, both in this family and in the business world. Going forward, I will be acknowledged as EM Ventures Principal. I will attend board meetings. I will have direct input on major strategic decisions. And in this house, I will be treated with the respect I've earned, not as a convenient service provider. Sam reached for my hand again, squeezing it firmly. Mom, I am so sorry. For all of it. For not seeing you, for taking you for granted, for never asking about your life before you started helping us. Her eyes filled with tears. I've been a terrible daughter. No, I said gently. You've been preoccupied and stressed. We all made choices that led us here. But now, we all have the opportunity to make different choices going forward. Noah, who had been remarkably quiet throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean you're rich, Grandma? Like super rich? Despite the tension, I couldn't help but smile. I've been fortunate with my investments, yes. Cool. His face lit up with the simple joy of a child. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? The innocence of his request broke some of the tension. Sam laughed shakily, wiping her eyes. Not tonight, buddy. It's getting late. Why don't you go get ready for bed? I'll be up to read with you in a few minutes. Once Noah had left the room, Dan finally sat back down, his posture less confrontational but still tense. I need time to process this, Eleanor. Finding out my mother-in-law has been secretly controlling my company for 8 years. It's a lot to take in. I understand that. And to be clear, I've never interfered with your operational leadership. I've trusted your vision for the company, even when I might have made different choices. That's why you never knew I was involved. Until I called you a burden, he said quietly, the full irony of the situation finally sinking in. Until I nearly died in that accident, I corrected, and realized I couldn't continue living as a fraction of myself. Bob cleared his throat. Eleanor, about Janice. I held up a hand. Not tonight, Robert. That's a separate conversation for another time. I stood, gathering the dinner plates. I think we've all had enough revelations for one evening. As I moved to the kitchen, Sam followed, taking the plates from my hands. Let me handle this, Mom. You've done enough. Her eyes were still red-rimmed, but there was a new determination in her expression. I meant what I said. I'm sorry for how blind I've been. I know, sweetheart. I touched her cheek gently. We'll figure this out together. All of us. Nay. The living room? I could hear Dan on the phone, his voice low and urgent, calling Jason, no doubt, to confirm everything I'd revealed. Bob had retreated upstairs, presumably to contemplate his matrimonial failures in private. I slipped out onto the back porch, taking a moment to breathe in the cool evening air. The sky was clear, stars emerging in the deepening blue. For the first time in years, I felt fully present in my own life, not as a supporting character in someone else's story, but as the protagonist of my own. My phone buzzed with a text from Pauline. Well, how did it go? I smiled, typing back. The truth is out. Everything changes now. Her response came immediately. About damn time? Drinks tomorrow to celebrate? Absolutely, I replied. Eleanor. Martinez is officially back in business. As I stood there under the stars, I felt neither triumph nor vindication, but something more profound, a sense of rightness, of restoration. The accident that had threatened my life had ultimately given it back to me, forcing me to acknowledge how much of myself I had surrendered in the name of family duty. Now came the harder part, rebuilding relationships on a foundation of truth. and mutual respect rather than convenience and obligation. But for the first time in years, I faced that challenge as my complete self. Not just Grandma Ellie, but Eleanor Martinez in full. The breaking point had come, not with a dramatic exit or a slammed door, but with a simple assertion of truth. And in that truth lay the possibility of something better for all of us, if they were willing to see me as I truly was, rather than as they had needed me to be. The morning after my revelation, I woke before dawn, an old habit from my investment. Days when markets in other time zones demanded early attention. I slipped out of bed carefully, mindful of my still healing injuries, and made my way to the kitchen. The house was silent, everyone else still asleep, giving me a rare moment of solitude. I prepared coffee and carried my mug to the study, where I opened my laptop to find dozens of emails awaiting my attention. Word of Eleanor Martinez's return to the financial world had spread quickly through my old network. Former colleagues, competitors, and clients all reaching out, some curious, others opportunistic, a few genuinely pleased to hear I was active again. Among them was a message from Jason. Eleanor, still processing last night's dinner bombshell, Dan called me immediately after. For what it's worth, I've always suspected EM Ventures was you. The investment strategy was too distinctively Martinez to be coincidence. Looking forward to working with you directly now. The Apex offer needs your public support to move forward. Let's talk soon. I smiled, appreciating Jason's adaptability. Unlike Dan, he seemed unfazed by the revelation of my identity, focused instead on the practical implications for Wiltech's future. Another email caught my attention, this one from Andrew Kendrick at Apex. Ms. Martinez, Pauline Chen has informed me of your position with EM Ventures. This certainly explains your insightful contributions during yesterday's meeting. I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss the acquisition terms with you directly, as the principal investor. Are you available for lunch today? I was composing my response when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Sam appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work despite the early hour, her expression hesitant. Mom, you're up early. Old habits. I gestured to the chair across from me. Couldn't sleep? She shook her head, sinking into the chair. I kept thinking about everything you said last night. About EM Ventures, about how we've treated you, about Dad and... She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the reference to Bob's apparent infidelity. It was a lot to process all at once, I acknowledged. I'm sorry for the abrupt delivery. No, don't apologize. If anything, you waited too long. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. I've been thinking about the house, our living arrangement. You were right about the financial imbalance. Dan and I need to contribute more. Or maybe we should consider finding our own place. Is that what you want? I asked carefully. She hesitated. I don't know. On one hand, Noah benefits so much from having you here. His therapists have all commented on his steady progress, and I know that's largely because of your consistent work with him. But on the other hand, she looked around the study, as if seeing it with new eyes. This is your house. You and Dad should be enjoying your retirement, not supporting two additional adults who are perfectly capable of supporting themselves. Let's not make any hasty decisions about living arrangements, I suggested. There's already enough change happening. What matters most right now is adjusting how we relate to each other, not necessarily where we all sleep. Sam nodded, relief evident in her posture. Thank you. And Mom, I want you to know, I'm genuinely in awe of what you did with Wiltech. Not just the investment itself, but keeping it secret all these years, watching Dan build the company with your money while... He had no idea. She shook her head, a reluctant smile forming. It's kind of brilliant, actually. It wasn't meant to be deceptive, I clarified. I simply wanted to help without complicating family dynamics, though in retrospect, perhaps a bit more complication up front would have prevented the situation we now find ourselves in. Where does this leave you and Dad? she asked hesitantly. That comment about Janice. I sighed, setting my coffee down. That's a conversation your father and I need to have privately. But I won't mislead you, Samantha. Our marriage hasn't been a true partnership for many years now. The accident just forced me to stop pretending otherwise. She nodded, her eyes sad but understanding. I'm sorry. For whatever it's worth, I think he's a fool. That makes two of us. I smiled to soften the words. Now tell me, how are you feeling about the Apex acquisition? As Dan's wife, not as my daughter. She considered the question carefully. Honestly, I think it's a smart move. Dan's been running himself ragged trying to scale Wiltec independently. The company needs Apex's resources to reach its full potential. She hesitated. But Dan's ego is tied up in being the founder CEO. Being acquired means ceding some control, and that's hard for him to accept. That's a fair assessment. Gestured to my laptop. Apex wants to meet today to discuss terms. As the principal investor, I need to decide whether to support this acquisition formally. And will you? I believe it's the right business decision, but I won't force it on Dan. His operational leadership has been crucial to Wiltec's success, and I respect that. I closed my laptop, which is why I'm meeting with him this morning to discuss our path forward, as business partners, not just family members. Sam raised an eyebrow. He agreed to that? He's meeting me at Meridian's offices at 9. I couldn't help but smile at her surprised expression. Apparently, revealing yourself as the controlling investor of someone's company does wonders for your meeting schedule. She laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in days. I can imagine. Her expression sobered. Mom, whatever happens with Wiltec, with Dad, with our living situation, I want you to know I see you now, the real you, not just as my mother or Noah's grandmother, but as Eleanor Martinez. And I'm proud to be your daughter. The simple words touched me more deeply than I'd expected, bringing a sudden warmth to my eyes. Thank you, Samantha. That means more than you know. After she left for work, I dressed carefully for my meeting with Dan. Another tailored suit, this one in navy, paired with a silk blouse and the pearl pendant Bob had given me for our 25th anniversary. The familiar routine of professional preparation felt like slipping back into my own skin after years of wearing someone else's. Meridian Financial had changed since my time there, the logo updated, the decor more modern, but the essence remained the same. As I walked through the lobby, I noted with satisfaction the subtle glances of recognition from longtime employees. I might have been gone for 8 years, but Eleanor Martinez was not forgotten. Matthew Chen, Pauline's husband and Meridian's current managing director, had graciously offered the use of a private conference room for my meeting with Dan. He greeted me with warm respect as I arrived. Eleanor, welcome back. It's been too long. He led me to an elegantly appointed corner room with views of the city. Pauline told me about your revelation last night. Quite the bombshell. It was time for truth, I said simply. He nodded in understanding. Well, the room is yours for as long as you need it. And Eleanor? He paused at the door. If you ever decide you're not fully retired anymore, there's always a place for you here. The tech investment division hasn't been the same without you. I thanked him, touched by the unexpected offer. As he left, I arranged my materials on the conference table, financial projections, acquisition analyses, and detailed notes on Wiltec's market position. Then I waited, watching Portland wake up through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dan arrived, precisely at 9, dressed in his best suit, expression carefully neutral. He paused momentarily in the doorway, taking in the scene. His mother-in-law in a prestigious financial firm's executive conference room, surrounded by professional materials, looking completely at home. Good morning, Eleanor, he said formally, setting his portfolio on the table. Daniel, thank you for coming. I gestured to the chair across from me. Coffee? Please. He sat down, his posture rigid with tension. This is quite the power move, meeting here instead of at home. This isn't about power plays, Daniel. It's about establishing appropriate boundaries between family matters and business discussions. I poured coffee from the carafe Matthew had provided. I thought a neutral professional environment would help us focus on Wiltech's future rather than our personal history. He accepted the coffee with a nod, studying me with new eyes. I spent half the night researching your career. At Meridian, you were impressive, far more accomplished than I realized. Thank you, though I would have preferred you knew that through conversation rather than crisis-driven research. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Fair point. He took a sip of coffee, then set the cup down carefully. So, EM Ventures, all this time, it was you. I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around it. What part specifically troubles you, Daniel? The fact that your primary investor was a woman? That it was your mother-in-law? Or simply that you didn't know? He considered the question honestly. All of it, I suppose. But mostly that someone I interacted with daily, He hesitated. Someone I often dismissed was secretly evaluating my every business decision. I wasn't secretly evaluating you, Daniel. I was watching over my investment while supporting my family. The two were always separate in my mind, until you made them inseparable by referring to me as a financial burden. He flinched. About that comment, it was thoughtless and inaccurate. I apologize sincerely. Apology accepted, I said simply. But more important than words is understanding why that perspective developed in the first place. Somewhere along the way, you began seeing me as an obligation rather than a contributor, despite all evidence to the contrary. It wasn't just me, he pointed out. The whole family dynamic shifted over time. You became invisible. I finished for him. Except when something needed doing. Yes. He had the grace to look ashamed. It happened so gradually that none of us noticed. Or maybe we just found it convenient not to notice. I appreciated his honesty, unexpected as it was. What's done is done, Daniel. What matters now is how we move forward, both as family and as business partners. He straightened slightly at the term business partners, as if the reality of our new relationship was still settling in. About that, where exactly does this leave Wiltech? You control 48% of the company. If you want the Apex acquisition to happen, it happens. Technically, yes. I opened a folder, sliding a document across the table to him. But I've always respected your operational leadership. Wiltech's success isn't just about the capital I provided. It's about the vision you executed. I won't undermine that by forcing decisions unilaterally. He scanned the document, eyebrows rising. This is a revised term sheet for the Apex acquisition. With the improvements I suggested yesterday, plus some additional protections I negotiated this morning. 50-50, cash equity split, performance earnouts, guaranteed board positions for key Wiltech leadership, and a structured integration plan that preserves your core development team. I tapped the paper. It's an excellent offer, Daniel, financially and strategically. He studied the terms, his trained eye quickly assessing the implications. This is very favorable, better than I expected. Apex wants Wiltech's technology badly enough to be generous. The question is whether you're ready to let go of being an independent CEO and become part of something larger. Dan leaned back, considering me with new respect. You've already decided this is the right move, haven't you? I believe it is, yes. Wiltech has reached an inflection point. You can continue growing incrementally on your own, or you can leverage Apex's resources to scale rapidly. The technology deserves the latter. And if I disagree? Then we'll explore alternatives. As I said, I won't force this decision, but I would ask you to consider it based on business merit, not ego." He smiled ruefully. "You don't pull punches, do you?" "I've wasted enough time being unnecessarily gentle, Daniel. 8 years of it, to be precise." He nodded, conceding the point. "May I take this to review more thoroughly? Discuss with the executive team?" "Of course, but Apex wants an answer by the end of the week. The tech acquisition market is moving quickly right now." "Understood." He closed the folder, his expression thoughtful. "You know, you could have revealed yourself as EM Ventures at any time over the years. Why now?" I hadn't expected such perceptiveness from him. The accident changed my perspective. When I was lying in that hospital bed, wondering if the chest pain was just bruising or something more serious, I realized how much of myself I'd surrendered for the sake of family harmony. How much I'd allowed myself to be diminished. I met his gaze directly. I decided that if I survived, I wouldn't live as a shadow of myself anymore. Something shifted in his expression, understanding, perhaps even respect. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you made that decision. The family dynamic wasn't healthy for any of us, least of all you. Thank you for acknowledging that." Gathered my papers, signaling the end of our business discussion. "Now, as your mother-in-law, rather than your investor, how is Noah doing with all this? He witnessed quite a dramatic dinner last night." Dan's professional mask softened at the mention of his son. "He seems okay, more curious than upset. He asked me this morning if you were going to be his boss now." A reluctant smile crossed his face. "I told him you already were, I just didn't know it." I laughed, genuinely amused by Noah's perspective. 8-year-olds have a way of cutting through pretense. They certainly do. Dan hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Eleanor, I've never questioned your devotion to Noah. Whatever else has gone wrong in our family dynamic, your relationship with him has been, well, it's been a lifeline for him. And for us." The unexpected acknowledgement touched me. "Thank you, Daniel. Noah has been my joy through all of this. I wouldn't change a minute of the time I've spent with him. We parted on better terms than we'd had in years, not quite warm, but respectful in a way that felt like solid ground to build upon." As Dan left with the acquisition materials, I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The conversation had gone better than I'd dared hope, with Dan showing a capacity for reflection I hadn't given him credit for. My next meeting was with Andrew Kendrick from Apex, who had suggested lunch at Portland's most exclusive restaurant, a power move I recognized from my own days in high-stakes negotiations. I arrived deliberately 5 minutes late, a subtle reminder that I wasn't intimidated by the setting or the stakes. "Ms. Martinez." Andrew stood as I approached the table, extending his hand. "Thank you for making time today." "Andrew, nice to see you again." I settled into my chair, accepting the menu from the hovering waiter. Though I suspect this is less about thanking me for my time and more about assessing whether EM Ventures is truly on board with your acquisition plans. He smiled, appreciating the directness. Guilty as charged, finding out that Wiltech's mysterious primary investor is actually Daniel Wilson's mother-in-law was unexpected. I needed to confirm that this family connection won't complicate our deal. A reasonable concern. Let me ease your mind. I separate business decisions from family matters. Always have. I closed the menu, having already decided. My investment in Wiltech was made on the technology's merit, not family sentiment. The same applies to this acquisition. Andrew studied me for a moment, then nodded. Good to hear. Your reputation at Meridian suggests as much, but I had to verify personally. Of course, due diligence is essential. I waited until after we'd ordered to pull out the revised term sheet I'd shown Dan earlier. Speaking of which, I've made some adjustments to your proposal that would better reflect Wiltech's true value while still meeting Apex's strategic goals. He raised an eyebrow, accepting the document. You've been busy. I've been catching up on 8 years of being unnecessarily passive, I corrected mildly. The revised terms are fair to both parties. I particularly want to highlight the integration, timeline, and team preservation clauses. Daniel may be my son-in-law, but he's also built an exceptional development team. Preserving that talent will be crucial to realizing the acquisition's full value. Andrew reviewed the terms carefully, his expression giving nothing away. These changes are substantial. They're necessary, I countered, and still within market range for acquisitions of this caliber. The equity component is higher than we initially proposed. The potential upside for Apex is correspondingly higher as well. Wiltech's algorithm will transform your retail analytics capabilities. That deserves to be reflected in the deal structure. He smiled slowly, a gleam of appreciation in his eyes. You haven't lost your touch, Ms. Martinez. Not one bit. Some skills never fade, I agreed. So, shall we discuss implementation details, or do you need to take this back to your board first? The lunch stretched to nearly 3 hours as we negotiated fine points of the acquisition. By the time we parted, we had verbally agreed on terms that were significantly more favorable to Wiltech than Apex's initial offer, while still giving Apex what they truly wanted: immediate access to Wiltech's proprietary technology and development team. As I drove home, I felt a sense of exhilaration I hadn't experienced in years. This was who I had always been: Eleanor Martinez, strategic thinker, fierce negotiator, respected professional. The accident had forced me to reclaim this part of myself, to emerge from the shadow of just being Grandma Ellie. The house was quiet when I arrived, except for Noah's voice coming from the kitchen. I found him sitting at the island, working on homework while Bob watched awkwardly from the other side. Their conversation faltered as I entered, Noah's face lighting up. Grandma, you're home! He jumped up to hug me. Did you know I got an A on my science project? Ms. Peterson said my presentation was the best in the class. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I hugged him back, savoring his uncomplicated affection. I'm so proud of you. Bob cleared his throat uncomfortably. Eleanor, could we talk? When you have a moment? I studied my husband of 40 years, noting the nervous way he fidgeted with his wedding ring. Once, I would have immediately accommodated his request, setting aside whatever I was doing to attend to his needs. Not anymore. I have a few work matters to finish first, I said evenly. Perhaps after dinner? He nodded, accepting this new dynamic with surprising grace. Of course. Take your time. I settled at the kitchen table with Noah, helping him with his math homework while responding to emails on my laptop, a comfortable multitasking that felt natural after years of balancing professional and family responsibilities. Bob hovered for a few minutes, then retreated to the living room, the subtle shift in household power clearly unsettling him. Sam arrived home around 6, her expression brightening when she saw me working with Noah. How did the meetings go? She asked, setting down her briefcase and kicking off her heels. Productively. The Apex acquisition is moving forward with improved terms. Dan seemed receptive, though he's taking time to review everything with the executive team. That's surprisingly reasonable of him. She poured herself a glass of water, leaning against the counter. He called me this afternoon, actually. Said he'd underestimated you for years and was trying to process everything. He sounded almost humbled. Growth comes in unexpected moments, I observed. How was your day? Good, actually. I spoke with my boss about adjusting my schedule. More flexible hours, some work-from-home days. I want to be more present for Noah. Take some of the daily responsibilities back from you. That sounds like a positive change, I said carefully. Though I'm happy to continue helping with Noah. I know. And we still need that help. But It should be because you want to spend time with him, not because you're the default caregiver while Dan and I build our careers. She sat down beside me, resting a hand on my arm. I've been thinking a lot about balance since last night, about what I've prioritized and what I've taken for granted. Noah looked up from his homework. Does that mean you'll be home more, Mom? Yes, buddy. That's exactly what it means. She ruffled his hair affectionately. I've missed too many science presentations already. Dinner that evening was a quiet affair, Sam cooking for a change, while I sat at the table with Noah, reviewing his spelling words. Bob set the table. Without being asked, a small but significant shift in our usual dynamics. Dan called to say he'd be working late, reviewing the acquisition materials with Jason and the CFO. After Noah went to bed, Bob finally got his requested conversation. We sat in the study, the room that had once been formally his domain, but had increasingly become my workspace over the past few days. Eleanor, about Janice, he began hesitantly. It's not what you think. We're just friends. I raised an eyebrow, skeptically. Friends who meet for extended golf games and send you home smelling of perfume? He had the grace to look ashamed. It evolved gradually. After you became so focused on Noah and the household, I felt sidelined. Janice made me feel valued again. And did you consider, even once, that I might also want to feel valued? That I might be more than just the household manager and childcare provider? I kept my voice level, determined not to show how deeply his betrayal had cut. Of course, I did, but you seemed content with your role. You never complained, never indicated you wanted anything different. My lack of complaint doesn't equal contentment, Robert. It equals years of conditioning to put everyone else's needs before my own. I sighed, suddenly tired of the conversation. But that's irrelevant now. What matters is where we go from here. What do you want, Eleanor? He asked, his voice subdued. Do you want me to end things with Janice? Try to rebuild our marriage? I considered the question carefully, giving it the thoughtful consideration our 40 years together deserved. I want to be true to myself, Robert. For the first time in decades, I'm remembering who I am beyond being a wife, mother, and grandmother. And I'm not sure that woman fits with where our marriage has ended up. Are you saying you want a divorce? His voice cracked slightly on the word. I'm saying I want honesty and respect, neither of which has characterized our relationship recently. I met his gaze steadily. I don't know if our marriage can be salvaged, or if I even want it to be. What I do know is that I won't continue in the role I've been playing. The convenient, uncomplaining wife who pretends not to notice your absences or your affair. It wasn't an affair, he protested weakly. Call it whatever you want, Robert. The trust is broken either way. I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. I suggest we both take some time to consider what we truly want going forward. In the meantime, perhaps the guest room would be more appropriate accommodations for you. He nodded, accepting this new reality with surprising resignation. For what it's worth, Eleanor, seeing you these past few days, back in your element, confident, commanding. It's reminded me of the woman I fell in love with. The woman I've missed without even realizing it. I've missed her too, I said softly. And I won't lose her again, regardless of what happens between us. After he left, I sat alone in the study, contemplating the rapid changes of the past few days. From invisible grandma to recognized financial power broker, from taken-for-granted wife to woman reclaiming her identity, the transformation was dizzying in its speed but exhilarating in its rightness. My phone buzzed with a text from Pauline. Heard from Andrew. You knocked the negotiation out of the park. Drinks to celebrate tomorrow? I smiled, texting back. Absolutely. The Eleanor Martinez comeback tour continues. Her response came quickly. It never should have ended in the first place. But better late than never. Better late than never, indeed. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Not just Grandma Ellie, not just Bob's wife or Sam's mother, but Eleanor Martinez in full. The woman who had built a respected career in a male-dominated industry, who had spotted investment opportunities others missed, who had commanded respect in boardrooms across the city. She had never truly gone away. She had simply been waiting, patient but persistent, for me to reclaim her. And now that I had, I would never let her go again, regardless of what happened with Bob, with Dan, with Wiltech, or with any other aspect of my life that had defined me for too long. The accident that had nearly taken my life had instead given it back to me, and I intended to live it fully, on my own terms, from this moment forward. 6 months after my car accident, I stood at the podium in Apex Group's largest conference room, surveying the assembled crowd of executives, investors, and press. The acquisition of Wiltech Solutions was officially complete, and as the principal of EM Ventures, I had been asked to say a few words at the closing ceremony. When I first invested in Wiltech 8 years ago, I saw potential where others saw only risk. I began, my voice steady and confident. The predictive analytics algorithm was revolutionary, but unproven. The market was skeptical, but I recognized something special, not just in the technology, but in the vision driving it forward. My gaze found Dan in the front row, his expression a complex mixture of pride and lingering adjustment to our new dynamic. Beside him sat Sam, beaming with undisguised admiration. Noah had wanted to attend but was in school, where he belonged, despite his protests that watching his grandmother be a boss was more educational than fourth-grade math. Today's acquisition represents more than a successful exit for Wiltech's investors, I continued. It represents the natural evolution of groundbreaking technology that deserves the wider platform Apex can provide. Under Daniel Wilson's leadership, Wiltech developed innovations that will transform retail analytics for decades to come. Under Apex's stewardship, those innovations will reach their full market potential. The speech continued for another few minutes, professional, measured, focused on the business merits of the acquisition. What I didn't mention was the personal transformation that had paralleled Wiltech's journey. The audience didn't need to know that the poised woman addressing them had, just 6 months earlier, been dismissed as a financial burden by her own son-in-law. They didn't need to know about the accident that had forced me to reclaim my identity, or the family earthquake that had followed. After the formal ceremony, Andrew Kendrick approached, champagne flute in hand. Eloquent as always, Eleanor. The board was impressed with your remarks. Thank you, Andrew. Though I suspect they were more impressed with the acquisition terms. I negotiated. I accepted the champagne with a small smile. 50-50 cash equity split with performance earnouts was quite the victory for Wiltech's shareholders. He laughed, conceding the point. Which reminds me, our earlier conversation about joining Apex's board of directors. Have you given it further consideration? I have. I took a deliberate sip of champagne. While I'm flattered by the offer, I've decided to focus on building EM Ventures into a more formal investment firm. The Wiltech exit has provided significant capital, and I've identified several promising opportunities in the women-led tech startup space. Competing with us for acquisitions, then? His tone was light, but his interest clearly piqued. Not competing, Andrew. Complementing. EM Ventures will focus on early-stage investments in founders who are typically overlooked by traditional venture capital. When they're ready for acquisition or later-stage funding, Apex will be my first call. I extended my hand. Think of it as building your future pipeline. He shook my hand, genuine respect in his eyes. Shrewd as always, Eleanor. I look forward to seeing what you build next. As Andrew moved on to greet other guests, Pauline appeared at my side, resplendent in a crimson suit that commanded attention. Look at you, holding court like you never left the financial world. She clinked her glass against mine. So, EM Ventures is officially expanding beyond its one-company portfolio? The paperwork was finalized yesterday. I've leased office space in the Morrison Tower and hired 2 analysts from Meridian. We launch formally next month. I couldn't keep the satisfaction from my voice. Not bad for a woman who was picking up her grandson from school 6 months ago. You were never just doing that, Eleanor. You were always you. The rest of us just failed to see it. She glanced across the room to where Dan was speaking with a group of Apex executives. How's he adjusting to the new reality? Better than I expected. The acquisition has actually been good for him. He's finally receiving industry recognition for Wiltech's technology, and his role heading Apex's new analytics division suits him. His ego has survived the transition remarkably intact. And home life? That was quite the powder keg you lit with your revelation. I followed her gaze to Sam, who was chatting animatedly with Jason Reed. Things have settled into a new normal. Sam has cut back her hours to spend more time with Noah. She's even talking about starting her own marketing consultancy so she can set her own schedule. And Bob? Currently living in a condo downtown while we figure out next steps. I kept my tone neutral, though the pain had dulled considerably over the months. We're in counseling, but I'm not optimistic about reconciliation. Some betrayals cut too deep, and some patterns are too entrenched to change. Pauline nodded in understanding. And you're okay with that outcome? I'm at peace with it. After 40 years, ending a marriage isn't simple or painless. But pretending it was still working would have been worse. I squared my shoulders. Besides, I have plenty to keep me occupied now. EM Ventures won't build itself. The conversation shifted to business matters, potential investments, market, trends, hiring strategies. This was the world I had stepped away from 8 years ago, and returning to it felt like coming home to myself. Not that I regretted the time spent with Noah. Those years had given me a relationship with my grandson that I treasured above all else. But I had learned the hard way that sacrificing my identity entirely had served no one, least of all Noah. As the reception wound down, Dan approached, his expression thoughtful. Quite a day, he observed, glancing around the room. From startup to acquisition in 8 years. Not bad. Not bad at all, I agreed. You should be proud of what you've built, Daniel. The technology truly is revolutionary. He nodded, accepting the compliment. I've been meaning to ask, how much did you actually understand about our algorithm when you made that initial investment? Was it just about helping Sam and Noah? Or did you genuinely see the potential? I wouldn't have invested if I didn't believe in the technology, I replied honestly. Family connection opened the door, but the decision was purely business. Your approach to predictive analytics was genuinely innovative, years ahead of competitors. A small smile tugged at his lips. You know, I've spent months trying to reconcile the Ellie who packed Noah's lunches with the Eleanor who controlled 48% of my company. It still feels surreal sometimes. They were always the same person, Daniel. One was just more visible to you than the other. I studied him carefully. Have you made peace with it? He considered the question for a moment. I think so. The initial shock was significant. My pride took a beating. But the acquisition has turned out better than I could have hoped. And your involvement actually strengthened our negotiating position considerably. He paused. And on a personal level, seeing you like this, in your element, has been eye-opening. I understand Sam better now, seeing where she comes from. High praise indeed, I remarked dryly. Deserved praise, he corrected. EM Ventures expansion plans sound impressive. Sam mentioned you're focusing on women-led tech startups? Among other underrepresented founders, yes. I've seen too many brilliant innovations overlooked because they didn't come packaged in the expected form. I raised an eyebrow. Any thoughts? On the strategy? I think you'll find diamonds others have missed, just like you did with Wiltech. He hesitated. And I'd like to offer my technical expertise if it would be helpful. Not as a formal role, I'm committed to Apex, but as a resource when you're evaluating technical merit. The offer surprised me. I'd appreciate that, Daniel. Thank you. Consider it partial repayment for 8 years of childcare. His attempt at humor fell slightly flat and he winced. Sorry, still working on that. I smiled, appreciating the effort. Progress, not perfection. Sam joined us, sliding her arm through mine. The Portland Business Journal wants a photo of the three of us for their acquisition coverage. Apparently, the family angle adds human interest to the business story. The irony, Dan murmured, following us toward the waiting photographer. The photo session was brief but symbolic, the three of us positioned as equal partners in Wiltech's success story rather than the hierarchical family structure that had defined us for so long. As the photographer directed us through various poses, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The accident that had seemed so devastating had ultimately been the catalyst for reclaiming my identity and reshaping my family relationships. After the reception, Sam and I shared a car back to the house while Dan headed to the Apex offices for a transitional leadership meeting. The drive gave us a rare moment of privacy. That was quite a speech, Mom, Sam said, genuine admiration in her voice. You had the entire room captivated. Thank you, sweetheart. It felt good to be back in that environment, being valued for my expertise rather than my domestic contributions. She winced slightly. I still feel terrible about how blind I was to what was happening, how we all treated you. Water under the bridge, I assured her. What matters is how we move forward. Speaking of which, she hesitated, then plunged ahead. I wanted to talk to you about our living situation. Now that the acquisition is complete and you're launching EM Ventures formally, I've been thinking it might be time for Dan and I to find our own place. I considered her words carefully. Is that what you want, or what you think I want? Both, maybe? You and Dad need space to figure out your relationship without us complicating things. And honestly, after everything that's happened, it feels like we've overstayed our welcome. Noah's therapy progress has been remarkable. Would moving disrupt that? I've spoken with his therapists. They believe he's stable enough now that a change of environment won't set him back, especially if his routine remains consistent. She squeezed my hand. And it's not like we'd be moving across the country. We're looking at houses within a 15-minute drive. You'd still see Noah all the time, just on terms that respect your life and schedule. The suggestion would have seemed unthinkable 6 months ago, my daughter and grandson moving out, me prioritizing my career over constant availability. But now it felt like a natural evolution, a healthy recalibration of boundaries that would benefit all of us. I think that sounds reasonable, I said finally, though I hope you know my door will always be open to Noah, and to you. I do know that. She smiled, a hint of mischief entering her expression. Besides, with Dad potentially moving out permanently, you might want the space for other pursuits. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Don't think I haven't noticed how often Matthew Chen calls to discuss business opportunities. Pauline mentioned he's been divorced for 2 years now. I felt a flush rise to my cheeks, ridiculous at my age, but there it was. Matthew and I are professional colleagues, nothing more. And that's why he personally secured Meridian's most prestigious conference room for your meeting with Dan, and why he sent that enormous flower arrangement when EM Ventures' new office lease was finalized. Samantha Wilson, are you attempting to matchmake your own mother? She laughed, the sound lighter and more carefree than I'd heard in months. I'm just saying, Mom, your life is your own now. You can shape it however you want, including the romantic aspects. The conversation shifted to Noah's school activities and Sam's nascent plans for her marketing consultancy, but her words lingered. In my mind, your life is your own now. Such a simple statement, yet so profound in its implications. For decades, my identity had been defined primarily through my relationships to others: wife, mother, grandmother. Now I was reclaiming the Eleanor who existed independently of those roles, who had her own ambitions, preferences, and yes, perhaps even romantic possibilities. When we arrived home, Noah burst through the door from his after-school program, full of excited chatter about a science experiment involving volcanic eruptions. As I helped him with his homework, while Sam prepared dinner, another subtle but significant shift in household dynamics, I marveled at how naturally we had adjusted to our new reality. Noah still received the support and attention he needed, but the responsibility was more evenly distributed, allowing each of us to bring our full selves to our various roles. That evening, after Noah was asleep, I sat in the study reviewing financial projections for EM Ventures' first round of investments. My phone buzzed with a text from Bob. Signed the lease renewal on the condo for 6 more months. Gives us time to figure things out. How was the acquisition ceremony? I appreciated his directness. Our counseling sessions had established more honest communication patterns, even as they revealed the fundamental incompatibilities that had grown between us over the decades. Ceremony went well, I replied. Dan performed admirably in his new role. Acquisition terms finalized as negotiated. His response came quickly. Congratulations, Eleanor. You always did see potential others missed. A simple acknowledgement, but meaningful in its respect for my professional acumen, something that had been sorely lacking in our marriage for years. Perhaps this was the best outcome we could hope for, a civil, respectful uncoupling that honored our shared history without binding us to patterns that no longer served either of us. I set the phone aside and returned to my projections, focusing on a particularly promising AI healthcare startup founded by 2 women engineers from Stanford. Their technology could revolutionize early detection of certain cancers, potentially saving thousands of lives. The market potential was enormous, but traditional venture capital had balked at the extended regulatory timeline. I saw what they didn't: a game-changing approach worth the longer horizon. As I worked late into the night, mind fully engaged, with complex financial models and market analyses, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was the Eleanor Martinez I had nearly lost: analytical, strategic, confidently navigating a complex business landscape. But she now existed alongside Grandma Ellie, who would still bake cookies with Noah and help with science projects. Neither identity diminished the other. Together they formed my complete self. The following morning, I dressed carefully for my first official day at EM Ventures' new offices. The corner suite on the 30th floor of Morrison Tower offered sweeping views of Portland and Mount Hood beyond, a far cry from the kitchen, island where I'd spent so many mornings packing Noah's lunch. "You look like a CEO," Sam observed, watching me apply the finishing touches to my outfit, a tailored charcoal suit with subtle burgundy accents. "Heading to the office already? I thought the official launch wasn't for another week." "The office is ready now, and I have calls with potential portfolio companies all morning." I brushed a speck of lint from my sleeve. "Besides, I want to get comfortable in the space before the team starts next Monday." She smiled, handing me a travel mug of coffee. "Well, go conquer the financial world. Noah and I have the morning." Routine covered. As I drove downtown, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The accident had been traumatic, yes, but it had also been transformative, forcing me to confront how much of myself I had surrendered and giving me the courage to reclaim it. The process hadn't been easy for anyone involved, but the outcome had ultimately been healthier for all of us. Dan had found a new respect for me, along with a more appropriate outlet for his ambitions within Apex. Sam had reassessed her priorities and was creating a more balanced life for herself and Noah. Bob and I were navigating a compassionate separation after decades of growing apart. And Noah, wonderful, perceptive Noah, had adapted to our new family dynamic with the resilience children often show when surrounded by honesty and love. As for me, I had remembered who I was beyond the roles I played for others, not by rejecting those roles, but by refusing to be limited to them, by insisting on being seen in my full complexity, with my skills, ambitions, and needs acknowledged, alongside my capacity to nurture and support. EM Ventures offices gleamed in the morning sunlight as I stepped off the elevator, sleek, modern, yet warmly inviting with comfortable seating areas and walls already adorned with contemporary art by women artists. My assistant, Jessica, a sharp recent MBA graduate I'd hired specifically for her unconventional background in both finance and social work, greeted me at the door. "Good morning, Ms. Martinez. Your first call is scheduled in 30 minutes. The financial models for Metascan are on your desk for review beforehand, and Matthew Chen called to confirm your lunch meeting at Riverside." "Thank you, Jessica." I smiled, appreciating her efficiency. "And please, it's Eleanor." My corner office felt immediately right, not too ostentatious, but befitting the founder of an emerging investment firm with significant capital at its disposal. I'd furnished it with a mixture of professional necessity and personal touches. A state-of-the-art standing desk, ergonomic seating for guests, and framed photographs of Noah alongside my finance industry awards from years past. As I settled in to review the Metascan documents before my call, I felt a sense of profound rightness, as if all the pieces of my life were finally in their proper places. Not perfectly aligned or permanently fixed, but in a configuration that honored the entirety of who I was. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Good luck on your first day, Grandma. Dad says you're going to help other companies like his get big money." "That's cool. Love you." I smiled, texting back, "Thank you, sweetheart. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Love you too. See you for dinner." The simple exchange embodied the new balance I'd found: professional ambition alongside familial love, neither diminishing the other. The car accident 6 months ago had nearly taken my life, but in a profound way, it had actually given it back to me. By forcing me to confront how I'd allowed myself to be diminished, it had catalyzed my reclamation of the woman I'd always been beneath the roles I played. As my first call began, the founders of Metascan, eager to pitch their revolutionary technology to EM Ventures, I felt fully present, fully engaged, fully myself. Eleanor Martinez was back in business, in every sense of the phrase, and this time I wouldn't be relegated to the shadows or reduced to a single dimension of my complex self. This time, I would be seen. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.